Hello everyone, you're watching AMN Plus. This is our Diplomatic Corner weekly program. UNDP Ethiopia has held its annual conference about Ethiopia's Green Journey 2030. Presentation has been held on the conference, and I'm now sitting with some of the presenters. We're going to talk about Ethiopia's efforts towards dealing with the effects of the climate change and also Ethiopia's efforts about carbon market. Stay with us. Let's talk about this annual conference of the UNDP.
A conference has three objectives. The first objective is to kind of document Ethiopia's record, strong achievement in terms of resilience, in terms of climate finance, in terms of green energy, with strong government leadership. The second objective is to look at new innovative ways for Ethiopia to mobilize international climate finance, especially in the aftermath of COP29, when there's a lot of money flowing around in the climate space. And we find three areas where Ethiopia can mobilize more than $2 billion, and that is carbon credits, green bonds, and debt swaps. And we will have a discussion of those in the next session. And those require some planning and coordination, but there's a lot of money out there to support Ethiopia. And the third is to make sure that out of all this work, that energy access improves for Ethiopians from 55 to more than 70% are connected to the grid or off grid, that the power, the energy trade of Ethiopia makes Ethiopia richer, and that communities throughout Ethiopia become more resilient to adapt to climate change. So including, communities that are pastoralist communities, communities that are in far-flung areas. We want to bring everyone connected with energy and with resilience kind of mechanism.
What do you mean by carbon markets, and how a nation gets involved in this business?
Yes.
It is called a business.
Yeah, so carbon market is, as the name suggests, a marketplace where companies, but also countries, can trade in emission reductions, so that globally emission reductions can take place in the most cost-efficient manner. How can Ethiopia and other countries get involved? Well, Ethiopia for sure has a big emission reduction potential, and other countries or corporations can come to Ethiopia and invest in emission reduction projects, also at the level of individual households, for instance, helping them switch to clean cooking options. So carbon market is, like I said, a marketplace for trading in emission reductions, but also one of the objectives is that every carbon offset project delivers, we call it co-benefits. So it delivers not only emission reductions, but also other, for instance, social or other environmental benefits to help local communities.
Who can actually involve in the carbon market? Governments, individuals, or campaigns?
Well, it's mostly for the governments and corporations. Individuals can contribute by being project developers. So very often projects like, for instance, cook stoves that I mentioned, involve individual households. So very often when it comes to those who can generate emission reductions, very often these are local communities or small startups that have ideas, that have access to local projects, but are in need of external financing. So individuals or households, they rather wouldn't be the buyers of carbon credits, but they can definitely be the source of carbon credits if they engage in emission reductions.
Full arguments. They say that why have there been delays? because of the ambitiously high number and size of IPP projects, overlapping mandates, insufficient capacity at the transactional level, and not enough policy support. So it is possible. You go to a country like Turkey, the Istanbul airport, some of the infrastructure in Turkey, it's all IPPs, PPPs. So it's a model that's worked in other countries, and we're fully optimistic it can work in Ethiopia. This is just to show you the way that the global costs have gone down for wind, solar in the last decade, but also to show you turbines are expensive, and you have all these other costs. Solar batteries are much more expensive than solar panels. I didn't notice before we started the work. And then you have many other kind of costs. Climate finance. We aren't going to get too much into numbers because numbers are a little bit complex, but I just want to tell you a story. Ethiopia has been a very large recipient of climate finance, and the donors have been mostly Ethiopia gets money from the multilateral vertical funds, GEF, GCF, bilateral aid, multilateral, IDA, non-traditional private sector. Ethiopian money for climate is largely grant, 70% is grant. There's a very limited use of concessional debt and very low borrowing of commercial. Most of the money historically in Ethiopia has come from adaptation, but and less for mitigation. But it's in the NDCs, it's the opposite. More is envisioned for mitigation. Afolu, which is kind of agriculture, forest, land, is the highest contributor to emissions with 29% of finance. The last thing is, this is a topic that has been discussed globally. What is climate finance? Is there over-reporting? Do we have good data? Are we looking at commitments and disbursements? If 10% of my project is climate, do I call the whole project climate? So there's a need for kind of oversight on the data and the metrics and the methodology of measuring climate finance. And there's a lot of greenwashing. Somebody does something and claims it's green, but maybe it's not green. What is the future of climate finance? So I want to just say that basically it is the finance for green renewable energy is here to stay, and Ethiopia has huge possibilities. The trifecta of carbon credits and green bonds can give at least $2 billion by 2030. Debt for nature swaps and payment for ecosystem services are very valuable. Multilateral vertical funds are not huge, but they're stable, consistent sources of financing once you understand procedures and methodologies. Adaptation fund and loss and damage fund. Loss and damage fund is a new animal on the block. It's starting, the 750 million pledges. We think that Ethiopia and other countries can get quite a bit. It just needs, the building needs to settle, and the determination of which countries qualify.
You mentioned $2 billion US dollars.
Yes.
And in your presentation, you also mentioned the figure. It's by 2030. I mean,
yes, by 2030, we focused on the innovative schemes. We think that the 2 billion is probably $1 billion of carbon credits and $1 billion of green bonds. Carbon credits allow you to reduce emissions by transferring credits and getting paid for it. Green bonds are ways to get investors to invest in renewable, to invest in climate and adaptation. We don't want to be lost in big money terms. With the 2 billion, you can have huge impact on beneficiaries, energy access, and climate finance in it, and impact on Ethiopia. PPP is a model that works very well in countries like India, like South Africa, and like Turkey. We think it has huge potential in Ethiopia. It needs a kind of a trust between public and private sector, a kind of coordination. UNDP, we want to support that, and transaction advisors on how to structure a PPP deal. So there's a lot of details on how you do risk sharing, how you have legal agreement. The devil is in the details on the PPP. Istanbul Airport is 50% PPP. It's mostly PPP, Istanbul Airport. Turkish Airline is 51 private, 49 public, I think. So this is a model. Indian highways are built by PPPs. So this is a model that Ethiopia needs to leverage more and more. And we are just saying you need the building blocks.
The idea here is that certain sectors that are emission intensive, they have to purchase offsets. One of the most notable examples, airlines. As of 2027, all international airlines will be obliged to purchase offsets that are of very high quality and integrity. So this is one of the key areas, I would say, of demand that we're seeing. And these carbon credits, carbon offsets, will need to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. So, so they will need to be issued under the framework of the United Nations. When it comes to other industries, other sectors, the idea here is that offsets are not shouldn't be used interchangeably or as a replacement of their own emission reductions efforts. They should only be used as a measure of, I would say, a last resort, where there are still some residual emissions. So the company has done everything, they invested in the best technologies, but for instance, there are process emissions that are just inevitable part of, let's say, steel making. And so for those residual emissions, the companies can purchase offsets to compensate for the emissions that they still that still remain in their inventory.
Ethiopia, like many nations, is facing the severe impact of climate change, characterized by recurring droughts, floods, and other environmental shocks. Our country's geographical location, topography, and relatively low adaptive capacity make us highly vulnerable to these impacts. According to a 2024 World Bank Country Climate and Development Report, annual GDP losses due to climate change in Ethiopia are expected to range between 1 to 1.5%, potentially rising to 5% by 2040s. Some estimate even foresee losses of up to 10% of GDP by 2045, threatening the livelihoods of millions and undermining the country's development prospects. These alarming projections underscores the urgent need for a comprehensive and collective response to the escalating climate crisis. We must act now, as Ethiopia's future growth depends on our abilities to address climate change effectively. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Ethiopia has been taking long-standing and consistent steps to build a climate-resilient and green economy. Allow me to outline some of the key actions taken. To begin with, we are committed to building a climate-resilient green economy. This involves integrating climate-resilient and green economic growth into the country's 10-year development plan, ensuring that climate considerations are at the heart of our development agendas. In addition, we have launched our national adaptation plan, prioritizing 18 key adaptation options across 5 of the most vulnerable sectors, and we are actively implementing it. Furthermore, in 2021, Ethiopia submitted the updated national determined contributions to the UNFCCC, aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 68.8% by 2030, alongside implementing 40 adaptation interventions targeting the most vulnerable sectors. Moreover, Ethiopia is one of the few African countries to have developed a long-term low-emission and climate-resilient development strategy, which targets a net zero and climate-resilient economy by 2050. If fully implemented, this strategy will yield significant benefits, including an annual GDP increase of 1.8% compared to business as usual, a 66% higher GDP by 2050, the creation of 1.25 million green jobs per year, which is about 865 jobs more compared to business as usual scenario, prevention of 200 million tons of crop losses, energy saving amounting to $1.2 billion per year, a 50% reduction in deforestation. In terms of concrete actions, Ethiopia has made significant strides. For instance, the Green Legacy initiatives have mobilized Ethiopians to plant approximately 40 billion seedlings over the past 6 years, increasing the country forest cover from 17.2 in 2019 to 23.6 in 2023. This initiative has not only contributed to green development, but also generated significant green jobs and improved livelihoods. Through our climate smart wheat production program, Ethiopia transitioned from being a wheat importer to net exporter within 3 years, enhancing resilience to climate-induced shocks. Our green transport transition is underway as we shift our transport sector towards e-mobility, reducing carbon emission and promoting sustainability. The Corridor Development Initiative is transforming former illegal waste dump sites into livable areas and recreational eco-parks, promoting both environmental sustainability and community well-being. Distinguished participants, the Ministry of Planning and Development is at the forefront of Ethiopia's climate actions efforts, both nationally and internationally, as we work towards a prosperous Green Ethiopia by 2030 and 2050. We have restructured the ministry to foster a whole-of-society approach to climate change, with a dedicated focus on environment, climate change, and population as a driver of development. Currently, the ministry is establishing systems to guide and support Ethiopia's climate goals, including the development of climate policies, a national carbon market strategy, legal frameworks, integrated monitoring and evaluation system, and stakeholder engagement strategies. In the coming weeks, we will be engaging with various stakeholders, including the private sector, civil society organization, the financial sector, and development partner, to define clear objectives and establish robust platform for collaboration. Excellencies, dear colleagues, the government and people of Ethiopia are deeply committed to a green, resilient future. This commitment is reflected in our policies and actions on the ground. At COP28 and 29, Ethiopia proudly showcased its progress and ambition, receiving international recognition for our achievement in the low emission and green growth strategy. The Ministry of Planning and Development has been actively leading negotiations, both at the national and regional level, including through our AMN presidency, taking the lead in the negotiation process by mobilizing African fellows, member states, and advocating for fair climate decisions. Ethiopia has also made significant strides through international collaborations, including joining the group of negative emitters at COP29 and partnering with G7 through the Italy-led Adaptation Accelerator Hub initiatives. Furthermore, Ethiopia has engaged with BRICS countries supporting each other's efforts to tackle climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Ethiopia's commitment to building a climate-resilient green economy is not just a national priority, but also a part of a broader regional and global effort. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all our development partners who have been supporting us on this journey. We look forward to strengthening our partnership to create a lasting national and global impact. I would like also to express my deep appreciation to UNDP for its continued support in helping Ethiopia achieve its green growth goals by 2030.
Three things Ethiopia can do. You have a strong government, but government and private sector need to talk more in the renewable space, especially in wind and solar. In many parts of Europe and Asia, private companies are doing wind and solar. So government doesn't have to do anything. It has to leverage resources and policies to allow private sector to come in, international and domestic. Number one. Number two, I think the strategy is to make a pipeline of projects. Let's look at communities across the country. Let's look at resilience projects. Let's look at feasibility studies, and then let's pitch that to the international donors, whether the Loss and Damage Fund, the GCF, the Adaptation Fund. People are waiting for project proposals. And the third thing is to have climate awareness. We have to be understanding that this climate change is not going to disappear. So we need to begin to adapt. you can predict some flooding, you can predict some landsliding, you can predict extreme weather. Let's anticipate a problem and adapt to the problem rather than waiting for the problem to come. Not everything can be controlled, but resilience is adaptation to these changes.
So carbon credit is a tradable instrument. Very often it is considered to be a financial instrument that represents the emission reduction that happened. So think about it as a currency, right? So those carbon credits, after they're generated, they can be traded multiple times, right? Through various stock exchanges, brokerage houses, and banks, for instance. They oftentimes have their own carbon trading desks.
You little talk to me about Ethiopia's efforts in carbon market. Do you have any more information about Ethiopia's carbon market? As you know, it is just exerting efforts on reforestation. You can mention the Green Legacy initiatives, and I think it has, the country Ethiopia has a great potential in renewable energy. So in this regard, how do you see that?
So as far as I understand, Ethiopia has just started looking at releasing carbon market roadmap. So this is at its infancy, as far as I understand. This is something that is underway. It is pretty important for that roadmap to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. And I think Ethiopia has a great potential when it comes to, for instance, boosting its renewable energy market through the support of instruments like green bonds or carbon markets. But again, I would like to underscore that it is really important for Ethiopia to be up to speed when it comes to global policy development, so that its roadmap already aligns and takes into account, for instance, what the countries have agreed on under the Paris Agreement and at each subsequent COP.
Today, we gather not only to celebrate the remarkable strides that Ethiopia has made in pursuit of sustainable development, but also to reaffirm our collective commitment to addressing the most pressing challenge of our time, climate change. As we stand at a critical juncture in history, we are acutely aware of the unprecedented global challenges posed by climate change. These challenges demand urgent action driven by global solidarity and a shared vision for a sustainable future for all. Ethiopia, though a negligible contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, has emerged as an unmatched leader in the global response to this existential threat and as a strong advocate for Africa's green journey, as demonstrated at recent COP summits. In just 5 years, we have witnessed extraordinary achievements in Ethiopia's green journey. The ambitious Green Legacy initiative, which has already planted 40 billion tree seedlings, driven by a collective effort of over 20 million people from all walks of life, stands as a testament to the resilience and commitment of the Ethiopian people to our shared problem. The documentary of this effort has already won a number of global film awards. Furthermore, renewed calls for environmental protection, including recent 6-month campaigns against plastic, air, noise, soil, industrial, and water pollutions, reflect a growing awareness and proactive stance towards safeguarding Ethiopia's natural resources. Ethiopia has also made significant strides in implementing its nationally determined contributions, showcasing its commitment to the Paris Agreement and its dedication to a sustainable future. Distinguished colleagues, the country is endowed with vast resources for green energy, be it solar, wind, hydro, or geothermal. It is not confronted with the controversies of just energy transition, as we've seen in many other African countries. It is leading the way in green energy with its vast green energy sources. This potential not only paves the way for job creation, but also accelerates Ethiopia's goal of achieving universal access to green and affordable energy by 2030, and also to regional integration and peace. Ethiopia is already exporting green energy to its neighbors, whether it's Tanzania, Kenya, South Sudan. Sharing this critical economic resource with neighbors can be a binding force for peace in the Horn of Africa region. It is my hope that public-private partnership will be unleashed in the energy sector to harness this vast resource. These colossal achievements are not just numbers. They symbolize hope, they symbolize unity, and a shared responsibility towards our planet. Excellencies, esteemed guests, despite Ethiopia's notable strides, we must also acknowledge the harsh realities that the country faces. It remains one of the most impacted by climate change effects. Between 2020 and 2023, 11 million people faced food insecurity and over 4 million with internal displacement due to frequent droughts, floods, as well as conflicts. While earthquakes and tremors may not be directly linked to climate change, their frequent occurrences and increasing magnitude in recent months complicate the challenges Ethiopia's communities are confronting. These challenges underscore the urgent need for increased support and solidarity from the global community. Against this backdrop, the goal of today's conference is twofold: to celebrate Ethiopia's leadership on the global green journey, as documented in the report to be presented, and to call for increased support for the country's efforts, particularly in accessing climate finance and private sector investment. Ethiopia has accomplished what few countries have achieved in addressing our existential threat, or the existential threat posed by climate change. It deserves to be fully rewarded for its commitment and its innovation. I urge all members of the diplomatic community to advocate for Ethiopia's access to climate finances, including green bonds, carbon credits, debt swap, etc., for the country to continue its vital work in combating climate change. At the United Nations Development Programme, we are steadfast in our commitment to accompany Ethiopia on its green journey. Our 5-year country program prioritizes access to affordable, clean, and renewable energy, which is essential for transitioning to job-rich and green, inclusive economy. The sustainable use of forest products is also an effort that we are embarking on in accompanying Ethiopia, and also in combating pollutions. Through our support projects, over 800,000 households, approximately 4.1 million people, achieved access to sustainable energy technologies in the last 2 years. These projects were designed and implemented in partnership with the government of Ethiopia, the Global Environment Facility, Sweden, China, and other key partners. We are determined to scale up these initiatives in the next 5 years through stronger partnership with the private sector, culminating in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In conclusion, as we embark on today's discussion, let us be inspired by Ethiopia's achievements and united in our resolve to support its green journey. Together, we can forge a path towards a sustainable future for all.
How do you see the potential of renewable energy in Ethiopia?
Hydro has huge potential. Solar and wind also have potential. Geothermal, we're on the fence. We are not 100% sure about geothermal, but Ethiopian renewable will surely double by 2030. At least double, if not more. Imagine 60,000 megawatt potential, 6,000 actual. So that's the gap. So Ethiopia has a long way to go to fully activate, but it's in the right path. We want it to accelerate, and our report provides the data. Yeah.
What about the Green Legacy Initiative?
Green Legacy Initiative is very strong. It's a very strong initiative supported by the highest levels of the government to combat deforestation and try to reduce emissions. So we fully support it.
It's UNDP's efforts in Ethiopia,
Yeah.
just in development sectors.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
UNDP is working on a range of projects from mini grids to resilience, to adaptation, to early warning systems, to helping vulnerable populations, to waste management, to natural resource. We have a lot in our paper and in the presentation. Three things. In our previous thing, we talked about the potential of Ethiopian manufacturing. Here we talk about the potential of Ethiopian power and renewables. And the third is there's a lot of inherent nascent dynamism in the services sector. ICT, offshoring of call centers, innovative finance, healthcare, insurance. There's a lot of skills development that can happen for Ethiopia to really move to the next frontier.
Well, everyone, that's it for this week. We've talked about Ethiopia's efforts towards dealing with climate change, towards its efforts in carbon markets and carbon trading. Until we meet you with another guest next week, have a wonderful time.